From what happened, we can see how devastating it is when things go wrong. Can you guess which employer employs the most diverse workforce in the country? I do think it's incredibly important for us to fact check some recent executive orders. The number one that we're going to start with is, can employers discriminate against workers now? Welcome back to the Two Cents Podcast. I'm Hannah Williams.
And I'm James Daniels.
And today we're going to be talking about air traffic controllers, considering it's a very timely topic with the airplane helicopter crash recently that was very tragic. And we also want to take a second to fact check some of Trump's executive orders and how they relate to workers. We've seen a lot of talk about, is DEI illegal now? Can I be legally discriminated against in the workplace because of my gender or my religion? We'll get into that. But first, we do want to apologize for missing last week's episode.
Yeah, both of us were feeling a little bit under the weather.
A little bit.
We both got the flu, actually.
Yeah, I
which
got
makes
it
sense.
first and then I gave it to you.
Yeah, I went snowboarding, came back to a sick wife, tended to her, and then got it myself.
No, that was bad. It felt like everything bad in the universe that had happened hit us like physically.
Yeah.
So there's something in the air. If anybody else has gotten the flu recently, goodness gracious, do we feel for you? But let's get into it. So we had an interview that we did last week that is going viral again because it was with an air traffic controller. And I, wasn't sure about whether or not we should address this. But as the video, picked up legs again and a lot of new comments were coming through, especially on Facebook. It went really viral on Facebook. And it was really disheartening for me to see some of the new comments coming out in light of the tragedy at the airport. And I guess we could talk about that first. So if you don't know, we are in the DC metro area. DCA, we don't like to call it Reagan. If you're from this
don't call
area,
it Reagan.
we don't call it Reagan. We really don't like that. It's DCA in our viewpoint, DC airport. That's our home airport. That's where we fly in and out of almost every single one of our trips. And it is the busiest airport in the country. When you fly in, it's also what you don't know unless you've flown into DCA is how tricky it is to land at DCA. It's a very busy airspace, but it's also like very quick. Like
Yeah.
you have to descend very rapidly in that airspace.
Yeah, because the actual airport is on the Potomac River.
Yeah.
What a lot of people don't know. So when you're actually flying in, you're flying directly over the river until you hit the airport, which has a short runway.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times when you fly in, you'll actually feel the plane like almost drop,
Yeah.
as it tries to hurry up and stick the landing before the runway runs out.
Yeah, it's scary to even be flying in and out of there, at least for me. I've had a lot more flight anxiety as we've flown, and now I'm at wit's end. I'm terrified to go fly. I don't know about all of you, but this tragedy was a long time coming, sadly, just based on, what was in the news and what we had heard from this air traffic controller that we interviewed himself, that there is a huge shortage of ATCs. I'll call them ATCs to spare everyone this long word. But when we did this interview with this ATC, he told us that he wanted to do the interview because he wanted more people to apply. They had a huge shortage and they get great benefits and great pay, although it's an incredibly difficult job. And that's why I wanted to talk about this today, because knowing what we know from that interview and feeling a bit defensive of them, I felt really terrible about the comments that were coming through from the tragedy. And to give you a sense of what those were, there were lots of people saying, that's a DEI hire if I ever saw one, or that he only had 3 years of experience, no wonder there was a crash, or just blaming him and his industry and his role for what had happened. We don't know what happened, to be clear. We don't know who is to blame, but I think it's fair to say that there is a little bit of blame to be placed on the traffic controllers, just because their job is to keep them separated, and clearly there was a miscommunication there in some form. But I think that blaming air traffic controllers, who are also victims of short staffing and incredible stress, it's kind of like this was going to happen no matter what without those adjustments. So I struggle to blame them when it was just the perfect storm.
Yeah, I mean, we know your parents live pretty much right across from the airport, and they tell us all the time about the
Aborted
aborted
landings.
landings,
Yeah.
So DCA, the airport in of itself is a very hectic place to fly in and out of, on top of the fact that we do have military helicopters constantly flying around. We see the Coast Guard, we see Black Hawks, we see, Air Force One. We see all these different types of birds occupying the same space. So yeah, it was bound to happen at some point in time. It's terrible that that
Tragic.
tragedy did happen. I would not place blame on any one person
Yeah.
because there were several things that had to have gone wrong in order for that to happen.
Mhm.
From the visualization that I seen, it could have been just a misunderstanding on the Black Hawk pilot side, and understanding the bird that they were actually supposed to see in the air versus the one that came across them. And at that point, that the person
It's
has
too
already
late.
perished, so there's no blame to be placed anywhere at that point.
Yeah, it's just so tragic. And, we, like I mentioned, DCA is our home airport, but it also breaks my heart that a lot of the victims were in the Fairfax area, especially the ice skaters, those young souls. And we are, Fairfax is our neighborhood in the Northern Virginia area. The ice skating rink that we know that they practiced at is just a couple miles away from our home. And so it feels very personal what happened, and it breaks my heart when I see people placing blame like that, because I also wanted to take this episode to educate our audience about what it takes to be an air traffic controller, and that, of course, there is going to be someone or some people to blame at the end of this, but being an air traffic controller, that does not mean that now that should be defunded like we're seeing in the news. People are just saying that they're not smart enough, they're DEI hires, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Not that DEI should be even an insult. Number one, being an air traffic controller is one of the hardest jobs in the world. It's very hard to get. The pass rate is incredibly low. And not only that, when you decide to become an air traffic controller, the requirements are very strict. You cannot be older than 30 or 31 when you apply. So they hire very young minds. The test is very difficult. Going to training, air traffic control school, takes 1 to 3 years before you can actually graduate. And you're not allowed, apparently, to touch the boards even after you graduate. It takes time to even graduate to that level. But a lot of these people have military backgrounds, so they bring a certain skill and expertise that a lot of normal civilians do not have. So this is a very difficult job. And one more thing that I want to stress that just for me is a punch in the gut to them being hounded in the media right now, that we've mentioned also before, is that air traffic controllers have trigger warning, one, if not the highest, one of the highest unalive rates of any job field. It's up there. It's, I think, definitely top three because of the stress of this job. And that's coupled not just with the strictness and the stress of having so many lives as your responsibility and keeping everyone safe, but because they are chronically understaffed. And, it makes sense. They only hire the best of the best.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, from everything that I've ever known about air traffic controllers from when I first entered the workforce, the first ATCs that I met were actually in the military.
mhm,
And they informed me of how difficult the job is and, all of the stress that they go through. And that's why I made an understanding that a lot of them, while they were in the military, they'd actually start making the steps so that they
mhm.
can migrate out of the military and do it for the civilian workforce where they get paid more,
Yeah,
with the understanding that the stress level does not deteriorate at that point. They're
yeah.
they're still dealing with high stress. Now you're just getting paid a little bit more. So it does make sense as to why they do have such a high unaliving rate,
Mhm,
because of the stress that they go through. I mean, maintaining all of these planes, and not even just the planes themselves, but usually a flight has anywhere between 80 to 160 people on there. So
mhm.
you're not responsible for one flight. You're responsible for
All
up
those
to
people.
160 lives.
And from what happened, we can see how devastating it is when things go wrong. So I can only imagine the weight of that on your shoulders. And I just feel so sorry for whoever. I really feel for them. I think about their mental state, the ones who were in charge of this. And ugh, I can only imagine. And then like when people are trying to insult them nowadays with the whole DEI hire. I mean, you guys know how we feel about the administration, but it's just so un-American to have that be the first thing that comes out of your mouth when you have a tragedy like this. It made me think about 9/11, and that, okay, sure, maybe it was performative and staged, that George Bush went down to ground zero and held a press conference, but there's no doubt that that speech and him going down there brought the country together. And this was one of those moments where he could have done that, and instead he chose to further divide us, which leads me to the point about DEI. Whether or not they were DEI says nothing about how skilled they are or the tragedy that occurred. But I do want to point out for anybody who is unsure about this, we mentioned that a lot of air traffic controllers, ATCs, are prior military. If you do not think that military members are DEI, you are sorely mistaken. Military members are almost the definition of DEI, and the funny thing about that is can you guess which employer employs the most diverse workforce in the country?
The U.S. government.
The U.S. military. Yep.
Mm.
So veterans and military members themselves are the most diverse group out there. So they are DEI,
Yeah,
but
look at me.
inherently, but inherently, like military members, veterans are a protected group because they make up a very small percentage of the population, and they have a very specific skill set that, they need to be protected in the hiring process. And so when you say, they're DEI, okay, and what? Like, and if they are, and what? It's just, it's
Yeah,
so wrong.
it's the way that people have weaponized the word,
Mhm.
turned it into more than what it actually is, and it's because of uh, this new societal norm that people are creating of being able to take things that you know are used as a baseline definition and now
Mhm.
weaponizing those to advance political views.
Yeah, it's wrong. It's wrong. These are people, these are Americans, these are our working class folks and colleagues. We need to defend them. So I just want to say, like, it's wrong to point the finger. And we should all, be trying to heal from this together and fix the solution as a whole instead of pointing fingers. Anything else we want to say about this
Yeah.
air traffic controller?
If you get the chance, check out air traffic controllers. Like it's a great job field. Like we said, it is high stress. There are times where you will be working long hours and stuff, but it does pay really well. They are severely understaffed and
Yes.
we'll have more issues in the airspace if we don't get the bodies in there to help fill these positions, and not just any bodies. I mean, obviously, like we said, the course in order to become an air traffic controller is very intense,
Yeah.
so not anybody will be making it. But if you think that you can handle it, by all means, give it a shot.
Yeah, we need the bodies, we need those workers. So if that's something that interests you, definitely go check it out, and they pay very well, as they should. So,
Our condolences go out to the families.
yeah, our condolences go out to the families. It's a huge tragedy. Yeah. The other thing that we wanted to talk about today is in the same vein, of policy and politics. It's kind of the top thing, of mind right now. But I do think it's incredibly important for us to fact check some recent executive orders, because it's very scary out there right now what's happening with DEI being banned, and the executive orders that are coming out. So we want to do a quick fact check. The number one that we're going to start with is, can employers discriminate against workers now? When Trump on January 21st, he repealed the Equal Employment Order, a lot of people were confused about whether or not that meant that it was the same as the Equal Employment Opportunity Act, which protects workers from discrimination in the workplace. And people were making these posts about, like, now I can be legally discriminated against because of my religion, my race, my gender, you name it. And while I'm not on Agent Orange's side or anything, I do think it's very important to take a non biased approach to these executive orders and understand what they mean and what they don't mean. Before we fact check, I want to let you, James, explain it, because I think you explained it best when I was freaking out, about, are these executive orders law?
Yeah, the executive orders that he's signing aren't actual law.
Hmm.
So there are certain things that the president is allowed to do, and then there's other things that he can suggest we do. But because of the way that our constitution works, the way that our government works. It must get approval from other levels, i.e., Congress,
Mhm.
the Supreme Court, in order for these things to actually take effect. For instance, I know a lot of people were freaking out, and which you should be, but a lot of people were freaking out about the federal funding that he freezed,
Yeah.
right? My whole thing with that was that legally he's not allowed to do that.
Right.
So yes, freak out because
It's trying.
yeah, he's trying to, but legally he's not allowed to.
Yeah.
Once Congress allocates funds, the president must then spend those funds as allocated.
Mhm.
So freezing funds is not within his power.
So there's a reasonable, level of panic here that this is not good. Then it's scary that they're even trying to pass things like this. But until it becomes law, like is signed by Congress into law, every executive order is just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that's the same with Democrats and Republicans. It's not just a Trump thing. But from that, yes. So his executive order where he repealed the equal employment order, which was another executive order passed by Lyndon B. Johnson, it does not negate the Equal Employment Opportunity Act or the Civil Rights Act of 1964, both of which protect workers from discrimination in the workplace. So, quick fact check, no. As of today, February, what day are we?
7th.
As of today, February 7th, an employer cannot legally discriminate against you because you're pregnant, because of your gender, because of your religion. And if that does happen, document everything. Make sure you go speak with a lawyer because the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, the other fact check coming right up, may not be around to help you, but that doesn't mean that the law has changed. You are still allowed to protect yourself and you still have rights. And now moving on to the next one. Is the NLRB being shut down? True or false, James?
Um, false.
It's kind of true. So, this is actually kind of devastating because we just interviewed the general
Yeah, the
counsel of the
general. Yep.
National Labor Relations Board, and she was let go lawfully. The president is allowed to, replace the general counsel if he wishes. What he is not allowed to do, it's illegal of him to fire board members. Board members are actually confirmed by the Senate, and Trump fired Gwen Wilcox, who has been there for a long time. She had a term that was set to continue until August of 2028. Him firing her was illegal. So, why is the NLRB more or less being shut down? Basically, the board needs 5 board members to function. So, right now, they're 3 members short of what they need to interpret and enforce federal labor law. Without a quorum, the board cannot resolve appeals, certify union representation, or protect workers against unfair labor practices. So while it is still a thing, the NLRB still exists, they're basically frozen. They
Yeah.
can't do anything. So any existing cases, I hate having to say this because we've said time and time again in the past that the NLRB is a resource for you to get free legal help if you are, for any reason discriminated against in the workplace or your union rights are taken away, you name it. That's not really a thing that I would recommend right now because your case is just going to be flat and it won't be responded to at the moment. This is incredibly concerning. Like the NLRB being shut down to me is the most clear attack on workers' rights. And if you're a Trump supporter and you've made it this far in this episode, I applaud you for listening to a different source. Thank you for being here. But I hope you understand and take this as face value that he has never cared about workers. These actions clearly demonstrate that he doesn't. He is not in favor of workers' rights, and that means he's not in favor of you. I don't know how much clearer we can get about that, but he is not pro worker, and these are very dangerous orders that he's taking.
Yeah. I mean, but what can you expect? He's a billionaire, and we aren't. Yeah.
Right. And the people that he has in his corner now who he's advocating for are some of the most anti-worker employers on the planet. We're talking Jeff Bezos and Amazon and Elon Musk with Tesla. Both of those companies have lobbied extensively. They have spent millions of dollars to basically declare the National Labor Relations Act unconstitutional, to take down the National Labor Relations Board. These are all things that are your protections in the workplace. Without them, they can now discriminate against you. They can fire you for whatever reason. If you want to unionize, they'll shut it down. It's incredibly concerning. I wish I had a better news than that. The last thing that we want to fact check is Black History Month canceled? Yes or no?
No.
Correct. Black History Month is not canceled, nor are any other special observances that were recently named in the DEI ban that Trump passed as an executive order recently, including, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, LGBTQ Pride Month, Holocaust Remembrance Day, Women's History Month, you name it, any type of special observance that falls within these categories for, protected workers and to celebrate them, that is not banned. President Trump did pass a DEI ban recently, meaning that any of these, special observances are not allowed to be celebrated. You can't have groups, like a Black workers group. You can't have a women's support group. You can't have anything like that. And what's really frustrating and kind of pissing me off, for lack of a better phrase, is that, like we just said, executive orders are not law. And the DEI ban is already getting legal questions. It's being stopped, it's being held up, it's being challenged legally because that goes against our constitutional rights. So, what really peeves me off is all these organizations and companies that are now removing their
Or rolling
DEI.
back.
They're rolling it back. And almost every single federal agency out there in the Pentagon, CIA, you name it, they're pulling suit.
One thing that I noticed being in the military is that usually whenever there's a change coming, the military tries to get ahead of it, you know?
Mhm.
So I think that that's kind of what it is. They're just trying to get ahead of the order coming down or something like that. I definitely don't agree with it because at the same time, like, yes, you're trying to get ahead of it for some odd reason, thinking that it's going to make it better, but you're also singling out all these individuals that are supposed to be a part of your collective.
Right. Yeah, if you're not giving them, what they've had for forever as a way to feel accepted and included and find a home, in a place where they have don't have the representation, fully that they're looking for, I don't see how that could help anybody.
Yeah, no. But like I said, these executive orders aren't law.
They're not
So,
the law.
what I would suggest you do as these executive orders get signed and come down, I would not say, ignore them because these aren't taking effect. I'd say be aware because
Mhm.
by all means, the things that they're trying to write into law could affect you one day or in the near future. And then also figure out what you can do on your end. At the end of the day, this is supposed to be the voice of us all. So if protesting, if signing petitions, if calling in, if writing emails is what you have to do to make sure that your voice is heard, I suggest you do it. And now is the time to do it.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to end this. If you have not already, please call your representatives, make your voice heard. I have already called our senators, both our senators, Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, several times. I think that they are probably tired of hearing my voice, but trust me, it works. They want to hear from you. We have elected these people into office to represent us, and so it's important for them to hear your voice and what you're concerned about. You don't have to have, the clearest message. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just need to communicate in some way, shape, or form that you're paying attention, you're concerned, and you want answers. So please call your representatives.
And with that, thank you guys for joining us this week. Happy Black History Month.
Happy Black History Month.
Yep.
Yeah.
And with that, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. And as always, give us your 2 cents on the topic.
But as always, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.